3 days after I buried my father, I walked into my kitchen and found my husband in his sweatpants, sipping coffee like it was any normal Wednesday. He looked up and said one sentence that shattered me. He had quit his job because my inheritance was enough for both of us now. My father wasn't even buried yet, and my husband had already spent a future that wasn't his to spend. Grant said he was tired after 33 years of quotas in airports, and that my father's company sale meant we'd never need to work again. I asked how he knew the amount. He hesitated, then said, even conservatively, "It has to be a few million." That hesitation scared me more than the words, because my father and I had never once discussed numbers. That night, his mother and sister came over, and Grant casually promised his mother a house and his sister $200,000 for her debts. Nobody asked how I was holding up. Nobody asked what I wanted. They skipped grief entirely and moved straight to distribution, dividing money that wasn't even confirmed while I sat invisible at my own table. The next morning, my father's attorney called, asking to meet me alone. In his office, he told me Grant had visited my father multiple times over the past several months, discussing the estate behind my back. He slid across a handwritten letter where my father recorded Grant saying, "Once Claire inherits, I can finally stop working." This idea hadn't been born the night my father died. It had been growing for months. The estate was worth nearly $4 million, held in a trust with one condition. For 5 years, large distributions required a trustee's approval. My father hadn't trusted my judgment less. He'd understood something about my marriage I hadn't let myself see. He wrote that he refused to leave me his opinion of my husband, along with his money, only enough time to discover the truth myself. Over the following weeks, I learned how far Grant's plans had gone. A deposit on a lake house pulled from our joint account. His mother telling her landlord she wouldn't renew her lease. His sister postponing her debt repayment because Grant promised the money was coming. He hadn't just made promises, he had rewritten other people's lives around money that was never his. I discovered he had resigned the very morning after my father died, already having discussed it with his boss weeks earlier, while my father was still alive. When I confronted him, he said, "We all knew what was coming. Something in me went cold." Back at the attorney's office, I learned there was more, a 6-page document dated 11 months before my father's death, titled The Family Investment Plan. Inside were projections for a lake house, his mother's home, his sister's debts, his own retirement, all funded by me. My name appeared over a dozen times, always as a number, never once as a person with her own wishes. I told the trustee I wanted nothing distributed. For the first time since my father died, real fear crossed my husband's face. He had never believed I would say no. Slowly, something shifted in him. He canceled the deposit, rebuilt his resume, and I overheard him tell his sister and mother the truth that he shouldn't have promised money that wasn't his. It mattered, but it didn't erase what had already happened. I sat him down with that investment plan and showed him exactly where my name appeared and exactly where my wishes never did. He admitted he had built a fantasy where my father's money would finally make him feel as accomplished as my father always seemed. I asked him to move out. He didn't fight me. The months that followed were lonelier than any revenge fantasy prepares you for. But I finally started living for myself. We went to therapy separately, then together, where he admitted the truth that broke me open. He had always assumed I'd come around because I always had before. Months later, clearing out my father's house, I found no hidden secret, just an ordinary, careful man, spare tape measures, old reading glasses, unfinished shelf plans. My daughter asked if her grandfather had known this would happen. I told her he hadn't set a trap. He had simply loved me enough to protect me, without ever trying to control my marriage himself. I never did anything dramatic with the inheritance. I secured my future, built an education fund for grandchildren I may someday have, and quietly continued a scholarship my father had supported for years. When Grant and I signed our final divorce papers, we shared coffee afterward, 22 years refusing to disappear just because the paperwork was done. He asked if I ever wondered what would have happened if he'd simply stayed at work. I told him honestly, we'd probably still be married, but the real problem would still be sitting there, waiting. For years, I had confused giving in with being a good wife. My father's final gift was never the money. It was time, quiet and protected, enough space to finally see what I would have otherwise talked myself out of seeing. Grant went back to work. And in a strange, necessary way, so did I. Except the job I finally quit was one I had been performing for 22 years without ever realizing it, calling silence peace when it was never peace at all.